Oh my God, can you believe what's happening in the world of NASCAR? Two of the biggest teams in the sport have just taken a massive legal step that could change the future of racing as we know it. This isn't just another story about cars speeding around a track. This is a high-stakes battle for control of the entire sport. The teams, 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports, are not holding back. They filed a federal antitrust lawsuit against NASCAR itself, and they're going straight for the jugular. This lawsuit is bigger than any race. It's about power, money, and the very structure of the sport. For years, NASCAR has been dominated by the France family, who have run the sport since its very beginning in 1948. But now, two of the sport's most prominent teams are accusing NASCAR of monopolistic practices. They claim NASCAR's business model is not only hurting the teams but also harming the sport's drivers, sponsors, and fans. This lawsuit is a full-on challenge to how NASCAR has operated for decades. The key issue at the heart of this legal battle is something called the charter system. NASCAR introduced this system in 2016, and it was supposed to give teams some security, a guaranteed spot in the races, and a share of the sport's revenue. Sounds great, right? Well, not so fast. According to the teams filing the lawsuit, this system has done the exact opposite. Instead of creating stability and financial success, it's left many teams struggling to survive. Running a NASCAR team isn't cheap, and these teams are saying they're barely scraping by while NASCAR itself is making bank. Let's take a step back and look at what's going on here. Michael Jordan, yes, that Michael Jordan, who owns 23XI Racing along with driver Denny Hamlin, is one of the key figures in this lawsuit. Jordan is known for being one of the fiercest competitors in the history of sports, and he's now bringing that same intensity to NASCAR. In his statement about the lawsuit, Jordan didn't hold back. He talked about how much he loves racing and how passionate the fans are, but he also made it clear that the way NASCAR is being run isn't fair. Not to the teams, not to the sponsors, and certainly not to the fans. He's not alone. Bob Jenkins, the owner of Front Row Motorsports, has been very open about the financial difficulties his team has faced. Jenkins has been a part of NASCAR for nearly 20 years, and yet he says he's never turned a profit. Even in 2021, when his driver Michael McDowell won the Daytona 500, Jenkins said his team didn't make any money. Can you imagine winning one of the biggest races in the world and still not turning a profit? That's crazy, and Jenkins has said enough is enough. He's fighting for a system that actually works for the teams, not just NASCAR. This lawsuit is shaking the foundation of NASCAR, and it all boils down to some very serious accusations. The teams are saying that NASCAR is using its power to create a monopoly, locking the teams into unfair deals, and making sure they can't compete anywhere else. They're claiming that NASCAR controls everything from the tracks where the races are held to the parts the teams are allowed to use in their cars. This level of control, according to the lawsuit, has left the teams with no other options but to play by NASCAR's rules or get out of the sport entirely. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The teams have hired a lawyer named Jeffrey Kessler. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Kessler is one of the top antitrust lawyers in the world, and he has a history of winning huge cases in the sports world. So when Kessler says this is one of the most anti-competitive cases he's ever seen, you know this is serious. What we are arguing here is that NASCAR is a monopoly. No surprise to NASCAR fans, there is no alternative to NASCAR, not just in this country but frankly around the world. And it got its monopoly illegally, so something had to change. On September 6th, NASCAR, using its monopoly, went to all the teams at 5 o'clock and said, "Here is a 100-page agreement. Either accept it by 6 o'clock or you cannot have a charter." Most of the teams folded because they couldn't afford to fight NASCAR. They couldn't risk their franchise or their employees. Two teams, my clients, did not fold. That's Front Row and 23XI. They decided someone had to stand up to this. Someone had to say, enough is enough. And they are going to file this lawsuit so that NASCAR could come into the 21st century. What makes this lawsuit different from other legal battles is the way NASCAR has allegedly used its power to crush any competition. The lawsuit points out that NASCAR owns a majority of the best racetracks in the country. These tracks are exclusive to NASCAR races, meaning no other racing series can use them. They've also bought out any potential competitors, like the Automobile Racing Club of America, ARCA. which used to be one of the only other stock car racing series in the US. Eventually, NASCAR has made it impossible for anyone else to create a rival league. One of the biggest issues the teams have is the way NASCAR has forced them into exclusive deals. According to the lawsuit, teams aren't allowed to participate in any other stock car races besides NASCAR's. This means if a team wanted to race in a different league, they couldn't. They're completely tied to NASCAR, whether they like it or not. And it doesn't stop there. NASCAR also controls the next-gen parts and cars that the teams are allowed to use, and they've made deals with suppliers that force the teams to buy their parts from specific companies, often at higher prices than they could get elsewhere. The teams are also upset about the way that negotiations for the new charter agreement have gone. They say NASCAR presented a take-it-or-leave-it offer just 48 hours before the playoffs began in 2025. Talk about pressure. The teams claim they were basically forced to sign the deal because NASCAR threatened to take away their charters, which would mean losing their guaranteed spots in the races. We got our DocuSign that evening at 6:37. That's when it came in, and we had to sign it by 12 o'clock, or we'd lose our charters, one team said. I didn't have a choice because we had to sign. I've got over 400 employees, OEM contracts with sponsors, and I've got to take care of my team. So, what happens next? Well, the teams are asking the court for a preliminary injunction, which would allow them to keep racing under new terms while the lawsuit is being decided. They're also seeking treble damages, which means they could be awarded 3 times the amount of money they've lost due to what they claim are NASCAR's anti-competitive practices. If the court rules in their favor, NASCAR could be facing a massive financial penalty, and the entire structure of the sport could change. This case could also set a major precedent for how professional sports leagues operate in the U.S. If the teams succeed, it could open the door for similar lawsuits in other sports, especially where exclusive contracts and monopolistic practices are involved. Additionally, sponsors and broadcasters who are closely watching this lawsuit may be prompted to reevaluate their own deals with NASCAR, potentially disrupting the business side of the sport even further. The outcome could change NASCAR forever. NASCAR has been the king of the hill for a long time, but this lawsuit could change that forever. And that's all we have for today's episode. Make sure to comment down your thoughts on this, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more upcoming videos.